Marvelous!
Alright. I figured I'd start this off with a bit of explanation to both you and the audience since you're here. What kind of started my, fascination? I don't know what to call it, for wiki skims is I was actually working on another project that may or may not be canceled. And I need to look up characters for the golden age of comics. I think because we wanted to add Cyclops to it, and I had to go figure out what Cyclops' deal was, only to find out that Cyclops is actually not a golden age character. Speaking of which, the golden age of comics that I'm referring to, you're here. Do you know what the golden age of comics is?
Golden age of comics was the first phase, the beginning of the comic industry for certain characters. Like, I know there's a golden age, a silver age, and a bronze age. I know the time zones around those times. I know the golden age was the best age for comics, I think, and it was just like the beginnings of comics, of superhero comics, basically.
You got the gist of it. Do you remember who? Because there's only on each side maybe 3 or 5 relevant characters from those ages. Do you remember who it was for DC?
Superman?
That is one of them.
Batman? I know those two are existed still. Wonder Woman.
Captain Marvel.
Oh, right, I forgot.
Which is now known as Shazam.
Yeah.
Do you remember who it was for, I think at the time they're called Timely Comics, but Marvel?
There was another Shazam, but no Captain Marvel.
I don't believe this Captain Marvel was Golden Age.
Oh. Iron Man was one of them, I think. Other than that, no, I don't know much.
Captain America, the original Human Torch, and Namor. Namor. So, the character that appears in the new Black Panther movie.
Which I have not watched yet.
Yes.
Because I don't have enough money to get tickets right now.
Have you seen the trailer at least?
Nope.
Okay.
I was trying not to spoil myself. I don't like spoilers. So each movie is just completely blind to me.
Brief stint into Golden Age. I do not believe Iron Man came up in my search, which was disappointing, and I wanted to know why. But also, through all of those things, it eventually led me to the Tales of Suspense series, which is where a lot of characters like Iron Man came from. I have actually read Tales of Suspense 39, which is where Iron Man comes from. I didn't read it until, relatively recently. So, after Journey Alpha. It is an interesting comic to go through. It's very fast, as far as pacing goes. They waste no time.
It's basically we waste no time. This is what's happening. This is what you accept it. Go.
Yeah, no, it's it is also. I recommend people read it, though. Keep in mind the era it came in. Iron Man is a Cold War era superhero, so of course he was also propaganda for the time. He was designed to be a very ultra capitalist, somewhat chauvinistic, but mostly playboy personality guy that was very different from what comic readers wanted. But the plan was to give him just enough things that you like him and then force him down your throat. To great success. I think what made me look into the Tales of Suspense series, though, was this game that I think you've seen me play before, called Marvel Superheroes.
I've seen you play it once.
Okay. At one point in time, that game was crack. I was addicted to that game. The addiction is relatively recent, too. It's a very old arcade game, came out before I was born. But it's super fun. I would recommend we play it even now. I think that game is also kind of what inspired me to look into more of these characters. Because it's just so damn fun. And I want to know what are these characters about? Specifically, what brought me to Tales of Suspense, though, is I was looking at the game facts, the game FAQs for this game in particular. This one had like short little intros about the characters, and I think it was like Magneto's or something. And I found out like he was like a Holocaust survivor, and I was like, "What? What? This is crazy." I gotta go. Okay, what is this Iron Man guy about? Which led me to Tales of Suspense. I read a whole bunch of things about. So Iron Man is probably the character I've done the most wiki skimming on. I read about like his stint as like Cold War propaganda man, his villains. So Black Widow, actually, one of his villains. She was a Russian spy, kind of. But I mean, she kind of still is, but
she's been changed a lot.
Yes. So has Iron Man, actually. So I mentioned before that he was like very capitalist, like pro anti-communism, things like that. Are you aware of how the government kind of gives subsidies to Silicon Valley companies?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. So the reason, or at least the proposed theory on why they do that is they want tech companies to eventually like create the technology that they can then use for war. I think the most notable example is something like Tesla, where the theory being that their endeavors into things like full self-driving will eventually enable them to create robots that they can send into war.
Well, I don't... Well, that...
It's theory.
I know it's a theory. But I'm like, I've recently seen what Tesla's doing, and like, I don't think they're ever going to reach that
No,
far.
they're not. Or they might eventually. There's going to be some other companies that get there first.
Also, like, they're not invited to anything government anymore, so...
Oh, yeah. Well, they also got cut from the government funding.
Yeah.
So now Elon Musk is against government subsidies. I say all that to say that during the Vietnam War, there was a bit of shift in Iron Man's character. So the Iron Man that we see in the movies is a very post-Vietnam War Iron Man. Because the Iron Man beforehand would have definitely kept making weapons for the government for war. And it is very interesting to both read about the shift and see the shift happening in person.
That's interesting.
Yes. Like, of course, we have like Black Widow, who is now a hero. Well, she kind of became a hero in the comics too, but...
Very interesting.
Alright. And with that out of the way, we can get into what we actually came here to do. I came to pod. I don't know about you. Oh, actually, I forgot there is a structure to this show. I'm going to start with the villains. What do you know about... and I don't expect you to know much. Ironmonger.
I don't know much about him before the show.
Mm-hmm. So you don't know, like, nothing about this guy, really?
No.
Besides what you saw in the movie?
Yep.
Okay. Justin Hammer. Although we briefly talked about it off camera.
Yeah. Besides what you told me, 0.
Okay, so Justin Hammer, to answer your question from off air, he is the guy who aided the Whip Man. I forgot his name, too.
Oh, yep, that was right. I remember him, but I can't remember his name. I think I have it down somewhere.
Yeah, he's the real whiny dude.
Yeah, he gets arrested.
Yeah. Pays somebody to build him robots,
yep,
and expects to take down Iron Man and his company.
Well, I just found it so stupid because why do you think this would work? You're literally helping a terrorist.
Yeah. I forgot the third villain's name, but he's not all that important. What do you know about AIM?
I know there were an organization actually in the comics.
Yes. They are one of Iron Man's premier villains, actually.
That makes sense, because I've heard about AIM a lot. They're always a villain, they always disguise themselves, as far as I know. And when you hear AIM I think they're mainly genetic engineering, or is that another company?
They dabble a lot in, like, genetics and things like that.
I think that's the main premise in all of them. But, as far as I know, some of the things were new to me. I've heard about AIM before, so I wasn't as surprised about them during the movie. But all the characters I had not heard of because I had never gone deep dive.
Yeah, I forgot the actual villain guy's name. I don't even know if he's a character in the comics. He probably is. But I was kind of disappointed because the things I know of AIM, I don't know if this guy is actually relevant in the comics or anything.
Yeah.
But what I know of AIM is AIMbots and, more importantly, MODOK, who did not make an appearance in this movie. Not hinted at in this movie. In fact, actually, we'll get into that when we get to Iron Man 3. I want to know what you got, though.
What I've got is, I'll start with the Iron Man 1.
Alright. Sounds good.
Iron Man 1, it makes sure immediately you know how cocky Iron Man is.
Mm-hmm.
There's sometimes Iron Man has some subtlety, from what I've heard. This movie, no. You are getting exactly who Iron Man is in the beginning. You're getting exactly what he does. And you get to show his unceremonious ego. I got very surprised by, Iron Man almost dying in the beginning. I expected him to just be captured, not, almost die and, put something in their heart. I should not have been surprised, honestly, because that's always Iron Man's thing. But I don't know if he's always had that thing in his heart to replace it out. I like how the Starks have, an advert at the beginning of the movie. And I was like, oh wow, they're really going to mimicking real life. I'm pretty sure Tony Stark's not going to awards has always been a thing. Is it true?
I mean, I haven't read enough of the Iron Man comics to know, but that does sound very in line with Iron Man.
Pepper Potts. I was surprised about her first appearance, literally just talking to one of Tony's one-night stands. I was like, oh, we're going with this route. I've seen an animated series of Iron Man, and he's his father and son are actually both alive. He doesn't know he's Iron Man. And that Iron Man show is very different. He started out a little selfish, but it's mainly in a teenage college way. And not the philanthropist millionaire, which is different. When I figured out that he was captured by terrorists and a whole bunch of other stuff, I found that scene very for the first thing in the movie, I was really surprised. All that stuff. It was wow. They really went there.
Mm-hmm.
I find it a little annoying that it was kind of quite obvious what they were doing, not exactly what they wanted. At the beginning when Iron Man was making his suit.
Oh, and how obvious it was?
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, I feel like they would have interfered sooner. But they didn't. Which I was annoyed by. But other than that, it was a great scene. I like how they show it's not an immediately perfect Iron Man suit which can do anything.
Yes.
They continue that trend, every invention is not perfect at the start. That's how the invention process works. It takes a long time to get perfect. It's a little off because it's usually failure after failure after failure.
Mm.
But he does get the suit somewhat functioning in the first try, so. I find it interesting that Tony Stark is a system with accountability thing. Word side, system about accountability. About his weapons being in terrorist hands. Yeah, I'm that's true, but I'm we don't know how they get into other enemy hands sometimes. Sometimes we don't, sometimes we do. Really depends on the situation, but I know that happens in real life. So I'm just yeah, I see where he's coming from. I find it really, really weird that he shuts down weapons manufacturing right away when his friend's not, because that will cause infighting in the company.
It does.
Yeah, it does. It does in the movie. It does cause infighting, but usually that would instead of in the judge court dissatisfaction thing, it would have immediately happened. Not him just telling Tony and a whole bunch of stuff. It usually just immediately happens, from what I know.
Alright, I want to interrupt you here real quick, because I feel like I should explain to you what I read in Tales of Suspense 39.
Okay.
So, the first third or basically everything you just went over is basically Tales of Suspense 39. It opens on Iron Man. So, there's a few changes that they make for various reasons. I'll let people decide what those reasons are. Iron Man is in Vietnam. They are fighting... I forgot the name of the army, but they're essentially fighting the communist army in Vietnam. And Tony is there demonstrating his new, like, what are they called?
Missiles?
No, not missiles, actually. I keep wanting to call them nanomachines, because that's basically what they are. But it's like they're like these super small fragments that are, like, extremely powerful. They don't really explain it well, but they don't need to. It's whatever time it was. He's showing off new tech, super small tech that they can use. It's important that they're small because they can't get large things through the jungles of Vietnam. He's there to make sure that everything goes well. It goes well to pretty good success, but then he falls for, like, this, like, you know, like out in, like, cartoons, they have, like, the little tripwire thing.
Oh gosh.
He falls from one of those, and he gets captured by the communist Vietnam army. So, yes, he literally does get captured by a terrorist, and he has, like, shrapnel in his heart as well. That is also true to the original comic, the first one. They essentially tell him, hey, or they lie to him and say, hey, you make us this weapon, we'll perform the surgery to get that shrapnel out of your heart. They're lying to him because they don't know how to do it. But he goes with it anyway because his plan is to make the Iron Man and get out of there. Like, shortly after he starts working, Jensen, you remember Jensen?
Yeah.
Okay. Jensen is also, he's like this old, like, Chinese dude too.
Yeah.
He's brought in there to assist and help out and stuff. Jensen is actually someone that Iron Man looked up to and followed his work. I don't know if they mentioned that in the movie.
No, they did not.
So yeah, they make the Iron Man. It is, aside from the flight, I believe, 1-to-1 with the movie.
Oh.
Yes. So that like big clunk of metal thing is exactly basically how it looked in the comic. That is the Invincible Iron Man, the very first one. It's limited in functionality. He actually has a sort of hard time walking in it at first. It's connected to his brain, not just his body. There's like a few panels of him relearning how to walk, but it's a comic and it's super fast paced. So they get past that immediately. He defeats a notable villain in particular, but that villain does not make an appearance in this movie because we're not in Vietnam. Makes the Iron Man suit, he defeats the terrorists, he gets out of there, and he vows to protect the world from the evil communism. So,
that sounds like propaganda.
It is propaganda. I recommend you read it, and I recommend other people read it too. You just have to keep in mind what time it came out in. You remember how, like, during the World Wars, it was, like, super okay to be racist toward, like, Japanese people and whoever was our enemy?
Oh.
It's not that bad, but you need to keep it in mind when you read this.
Okay.
So also, what's notable is that at the end of that comic, he does not vow to... In fact, actually, people in Vietnam don't have his technology at all. I think that's something of a parallel to real life. It reeks of Operation Cyclone, if you know what that is.
I don't know too much.
That was the CIA operation that essentially we funded a bunch of, like, Islamic extremists in Afghanistan.
Oh, I've heard about that.
To kind of rebuild our relationships with Pakistan.
I've heard about that.
But it's through those actions that eventually a bunch of people in Afghanistan eventually got our weapons. Not that that's exactly what's happening in Iron Man, but it reeks of that. And I have a feeling that they changed it to Afghanistan from Vietnam because, what I mentioned earlier, this being a post-Vietnam War Iron Man. The Vietnam War was very unpopular among Americans, especially among comic readers. And so they kind of had to pivot from being like a super like pro-patriot capitalism, build the weapons for war Iron Man to something that's, maybe I should reconsider my actions just a little bit. Alright, I didn't want to... Sorry for like going too far off the rail, or not off the rails, off of what your notes
That's fine.
entail, but please proceed.
Well, immediately after all this, I find the hilarious news anchor of saying, like, flee, 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 flee Tony Stark. Like, oh, I guess that's interesting. I think that's parodying something I don't remember.
I don't remember. I think I have something written down about the references in here.
Yeah. Tony immediately gets us home. I found the operation what Tony makes Pepper do. It just made me like, ugh.
What an asshole.
made me like super uncomfortable just even watching it. And that immediately set me like what Tony Stark personality was now. He was trusting of her, but he still doesn't give any warnings. The meetings, the stocks, things we talked about earlier, I thought that would be like immediate, like the day after, but it was a little longer. I guess I find it interesting that I got annoyed by this. Tony's first test flight of his new suit, because he immediately gets to be able to fly. That part I was like, it's his first suit. Then I saw him like crash because it was so heavy, and like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right.
Strategic Homeland Interventor Lightning Division is being ignored. So, like, whatever that means, like the person with Tony's like friend with, who eventually gets the other Iron Man suit.
Shield.
Yep, Shield gets ignored, and then when Tony starts flying on his first like proper Iron Man suit, he doesn't tell his friend what he's doing. I'm like, okay, his ego is still there, but I'm glad he told him eventually, like, that's me, because I was like, then I was like, at least he has some inside information. I like how Tony Stark and Pepper don't immediately get together. I was worried about that because I don't understand romance that well sometimes, but I'm like, immediate romance together thing doesn't usually happen in real life. I like how Tony Stark's getting consequences from his past like relationships, like one night stands immediately. I'm like, yep, that would happen. Tony's business partner sold weapons right away. I was surprised. But then I wasn't surprised because I should have expected it. That's when I realized, oh yeah, he's going to be the main villain of this movie. Tony Stark immediately goes to get rid of the weapons he just stole. Then we learned that Tony's friend tried to kill him, his business partner. Tony Stark's my favorite line, you think because you have an idea, it belongs to you. Happens after that.
The plight of every modder on the internet ever.
I like Pepper Potts actually does help him a little. I like the ending scene when he makes his own sheet machine. I was like confused, like Tony Stark, like how does he survive this? But it's not. It's like kind of waved away.
Because we need him for 2 more movies.
Then I remember, oh yeah, this actually happened when he says, "I am Iron Man," and that's basically the first movie for me.
All right, I might as well jump in.
Yep.
So, one thing I forgot to mention in the wiki skim is Ironmonger. Obadiah Stane, I think his name is. Typically depicted as a rival to Iron Man, not as a business partner, which makes more sense for him to be the villain. I still think what they did with him is interesting. This movie, going through these movies again is interesting. We talked about it a lot off air, but neither of us remember much of these movies. I remember a lot more of Iron Man 3 because I did it for Journey Alpha. Specifically because I could not remember anything that happened in the movie. And I thought I had not watched it.
It's interesting how little I think the general public remembers these.
I don't think most people remember much of what happens in these movies, actually.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
It makes for an interesting watching experience. We can watch it again, basically.
Yeah. Like, some people remember these movies and their plots forever, but some movies are just like, yeah, they're good, and then people forget about them.
Yeah, this movie wasn't, like, stellar, but it was, yeah, pretty good.
Yeah. So that's why I think they forget. When it's pretty good and not, like, stellar or, like, something that immediately graves in your brain.
Or, like, bad.
Or bad. It won't stay in your memory very long, which is honestly weird for me.
It is not an average movie either.
Yeah.
It is an above average movie.
Yeah.
But you just don't remember anything that happened in it.
Basically. I have to wonder why that is, but like I don't remember anything what happened to Avatar. Not the series, the movie.
The
Fish.
Not Last Airbender, the like super colorful one.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was like an average movie though. It's mostly held up for how like pretty it was and still is.
Let's go on to